Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. I am your host for this episode, Jim Root, joined by the rest of the three-man weave crew, Matthew Cox, Kai McEwen. We are here to break down the Final Four. We've come to it at last. The road ends here in San Antonio with arguably one of the best Final Fours ever. We're going to get the guys' quick take on that before we break down the games from every conceivable gambling angle that we can think of. We're excited for it. Big ones in Saturday, down in San Antonio, down in Texas. Kai and I will be headed down there in person. Matt will be our satellite correspondent from up in Chicago. Fellas, let's just start right there. We've got all four one seeds for the first time since 2008. Very well documented. That was also in San Antonio, as everyone has mentioned. Kai, is this the best Final Four ever, considering the quality of teams we've gotten?
Yes, I'm going absolutely yes. It's not just the quality, it's the gap between the top four teams and the rest of the nation. The margin between number four and number five is huge. So yes, it's the best four teams in the country. It's the best four teams in the country by far. I think '08 was also ended up being the top four teams in Ken Palm were in the Final Four, but they weren't quite as dominant compared to these teams. And these teams are frankly better. It's the best Final Four of all time. I'm excited, Matthew.
It is the best Final Four of all time. However, we were at maybe the second most intriguing Final Four of all time. I'm not sure how best, but the UNC Duke, Villanova, and what other team? Tech?
Michigan State?
Michigan State. Thank you.
Wasn't it?
Um,
No.
in NOLA? No, not Michigan
It
State.
was in New Orleans for sure. KU, I think.
KU.
Kansas, there
Yes,
we go.
that
Team that
was
won
They
both.
won.
Yes.
that was the true blue blood Final Four. This is like now, I think, a good microcosm of like the new era of college basketball. There are many new bloods, and obviously the four teams that are in San Antone. Good, Jim. Kai, you got to make sure you cut off the
San
IO.
Antone.
They'll call you out for being a fraud if you don't. Yeah. So,
Ah,
Well, it ain't all new bloods, Matthew, because your boys, the Blue Devils, are the classic blue blood. They are down there in San Antonio as well, seeking their sixth title. I believe Mr. Krzyzewski racked up five while in Durham, and they're the number one team. They're the top ranked team in Ken Palm. They're the second ranked team ever in Ken Palm per adjusted efficiency margin. We have four of the top 10 teams of all time per that metric that goes back to 1997. That alone would indicate, yes, potentially the best Final Four ever. Hopefully, the quality of the games indicate such a great quality of these teams. But let's talk about them. Let's get into that. We've got mentioned the quality of the teams. Two double champs, Duke and Houston, both won regular season and tournament titles. Auburn won the SEC regular season. Florida won the SEC tournament. Considering how good that league is, getting each of those champs makes a lot of sense. Hey, maybe winning the conference tournament does matter in the future, so teams should play for that. Start with Florida versus Auburn. Unsurprisingly, the first game of the day. Duke, the nightcap team of all nightcap teams, to get ratings, ratings, ratings. We've got Florida minus 2.5, a high total of 160 and a half, although it has ticked down a little bit since open, down 1.5 points. Matthew, I'm going to go to you first here. We'll get your take on this SEC rubber match, although they did only play once during the regular season, with Florida getting the win. How are you looking at this game from a side and total perspective?
well, I think the Jonai Broom re-injury is obviously the story that people will have to track throughout the week. It seems like he's fine, right? But it has been, I think, two or three times this year he has the world has stopped and gasped at that potentially being a seismic shift in the landscape. But he looks good. I think the way he's kind of labored through it, Kai, you can tell he just sort of like almost hobbles his way to dominance in an awkward way. But that's I think the whole matchup on both sides revolves around Broom's effectiveness, right? He was not effective in that game on Friday against Michigan, right? I think Auburn really got away with one there in the second half by preying on Michigan's turnovers, and their guards really led them, I think, down the stretch, right? Denver Jones into Hot Pettiford. I think that's a continuation of the matchup. The matchup edge I think they have to really lean into here. Now, as awesome as Florida's guards have been, as big as those guards are, I think you got to look at Denver Jones and Pettiford. Pettiford a little smaller, so Jones is the guy I think is like the X factor. I'm already kind of going right to player props. I've sort of dovetailed off of the side and total. I think both are pretty sharp. No official plays there, but I am looking at some player props, and the Auburn guards I think are going to be poised for some big production, whether it be in garbage time or just because I think they do have some matchup favorability here, especially with Broom and Cardwell maybe not being as assertive or dominant up front in the post.
A quick
Yeah.
follow-up for you, Matthew. Denver Jones had 2 points on 0 of 4 shooting in the first matchup. Does that scare you?
A little bit. Because again, I think the key thing that Florida has is size on the perimeter, but I think the Denver Jones we've seen lately in this tournament has just been different. So I do think I think in this matchup you're going to need him, right? Whether it's an efficient, path to a props over or volume. I think he's the one guy I've circled in terms of really breaks out and has big game, lots of option, lots of usage for sure.
Yeah, Jim mentioned the first matchup. Florida smoked that meeting. They led by 21 at Auburn. It was really impressive. And they didn't even have Elijah Martin. I would say they're, I'll call him second best player behind Walter Clayton. That's maybe even a little controversial with Alex Condon. He's been fantastic this year. But their interior defense led the way. Efficient offense, of course, good shooting. Auburn won the turnover battle and grabbed more offensive rebounds. It wasn't like they played horrible. Florida was just that good that night. And I think this Florida team is awesome. That game was 74 possessions, 171 points. I'm not sure we really get a shootout in this game. I don't know if that's the best path for either team necessarily. Florida loves to play in transition, loves to run, but I don't think Golden Mind's having this as a slog. He has waves of bigs he can throw at Broom, with Condon, with Hogg, with Handlocked, and with Chinyalu. It's arguably the deepest front court in the country. And Broom got his in the first matchup. The key is for Florida not to key in too much and overplay on Broom, because you mentioned Denver Jones, but Pettiford and Johnson and Kelly and Baker Mazzara, there are plenty of other weapons for Auburn. This offense is so efficient, number one in shot quality, top 4 in the country with Florida. It's really a tough team to stop, especially if you just laser focus on Broom. He's a good passer too. I just love Walter Clayton. He's a star. I do think Florida can find success in the open floor if they choose to go that route. I do think they can compete on the glass with Auburn, which is key. I love this Gator team. I want them to win, but man, Auburn as a dog is very tempting to me. I don't believe they've been a dog, at all this season. If they have, it's been very, very few times, and that's tempting. I'm on the fence on the side and total, kind of like Matthew.
Yeah, I don't have any official play on the side or total either. I think as we get down to it, those numbers get sharper and sharper. I've also started looking a little more at some of the player props. Kai, I'm going to quick try to check on that Auburn. Have they been a dog?
No, I have that right here, Jim. I'm prepped,
Oh,
baby.
fire away.
Twice.
Oh, okay.
Twice.
Twice.
Okay.
Duke.
At Duke makes sense.
And how about this? Houston. Forgot those two teams
Oh,
played, didn't you?
How about that?
November 9th. Yeah.
Yes.
Auburn won, beat Houston, and they lost at Duke. Did not cover. So 1-1. We can make a lot of 2 games. But it's funny that the 2 times Kai, you're right, they actually have been a dog this year where it gets the other 2 teams in this Final Four.
Yeah, well, the fact that Auburn's played all 3 teams in the Final Four and only one of them's in their conference, it just tells you again how hard their schedule was, how impressive what they did for the first 29 games of the season, how impressive that accomplishments were that got them the number 1 overall seed despite losing 3 of their final 4 games. The pace is going to be interesting. As Kai mentioned, first one got up and down. I believe our guy Stuckey has an angle on the Elite 8 games tend to slow down more than the Final 4 games. I think there's a getting there nervousness more than there is okay, we're here, let's play, let's get up and down, let's be ourselves. So both these teams I think would be a little bit prone to getting up and down. And again, your take on the total should probably impact your take on player props, because if you're thinking under, you don't want to be hammering a bunch of overs, whether it be rebounds, assists, or points. So Matt, you mentioned the Denver Jones, Tahad Pettiford angle. I'll give you 2 that I like, and I'll see what you think here. One, Walter Clayton over 3.5 assists, minus 120 here. So there's a little bit of juice to pay for it. He had 9 in the first meeting with Auburn. He's gone over 3.5 in 8 of his last 11. He played all 40 minutes against Auburn. Now, granted, no Elijah Martin, but I think that is indicative of what could happen here. The only 3 he's gone under in the last 11 games, Norfolk State, he played 29 minutes. Who cares? That game doesn't matter. First round game against the 16 seed. Then UConn and Tennessee, they both really slowed the game down, made it much more of a half court kind of brawl, a lower total than 160.5. When the teams are willing to get up and down with them, he's racked up assists. He's gotten 4 in the last 2. He's had some really big gaudy assist totals down the stretch. So that is one I'm looking at. The other is Alex Condon under 7.5 rebounds. Unfortunately, people are onto this one. Minus 145. The juice is really hitting hard there. He did have 10 in their first meeting, but he was healthy then. I think he's going to be limited here with the ankle. It's just tough to recover from that immediately in a week, even with a ton of treatment. They also did not have Handlogton in the first game. He wasn't back from his broken leg yet. So I think maybe they'll be a little bit more democratic with minutes, kind of without some explosiveness, going under 7.5. He's also gone under it or he's gone over that once in the last six. So 5 of the last 6 under. I think this kind of trends well, Matthew. Clayton and Condon, any thoughts on those two? And then you can hit me with any others you have.
Yeah, I like that as well. Back to my broom point. I actually was looking. It's the problem with these markets is there's a lot of books don't offer the under, which is ridiculous. Like I kind of think a broom under is worth a look here because you're going to probably get lines of like 20
on scoring.
On scoring, yeah.
From BetMGM right now, 17.5 is the total with even money to the under.
To the under, yeah. See, I think
18.5 at FanDuel. Shop around.
I'm trying to find. Okay, yeah, FanDuel. I see 18. Oh, 18.5. Thank you, Kai. Yes, I like that one. Yeah, Jim, to your point, and actually, I just want to go back to my Denver Jones point. The problem with Jones a little bit is that he is like one of their premier defenders, and you could see him getting a lot of the Clayton matchup. And certainly, with how meticulous Pearl is with his game plans. Excuse me, probably something to do with those high assist totals, Jim. You mentioned something to do with him just like let's make others beat us. Clayton's too good. I think he does draw a lot of gravity and a lot of attention. And pace-wise, I'm of the belief this game will get up and down. I think Auburn's been okay playing multiple styles. Pearl has really touted that as like a strength of this team. He likes that they can win multiple ways, but Florida plays their way. And I think that game, and Auburn can win that way. And I think that's what the way this game swings, Kai. So that I think if you're looking for a total, and I have the updated, again, the theme of this podcast is large samples. 10-6 to the over Final Fours since 2016, since the shot clock, or since the shot clock was
went to 30.
So went to 30. So there you go. Huge trends in the favor of the over for Final Four. I agree with Stuckey's point though. Elite Eight to Final Four, more overy, more free flowing in terms of pace. So
if I'm going to dip my toe in the prop market, which I don't often do, Thomas Houck, 3-pointers. Why not? Let's do it. He's shot 17 this tournament, and him to make 2 is plus 320 at FanDuel, minus 154 to hit 1. I do think he'll hit 1. He shot 4 in the first matchup, 1 for 4 against Auburn. I think he has a pretty good chance of making 1 or 2 in this game. So hey, there's my weird player prop for this one.
I think he gets a lot of minutes too. He should be 30. He's been 30 plus the last 2 games, I think, with Condon's injury. And Chinyelu's been kind of hit or miss. And so I think maybe Golden Net staff lean more into the hot hand and certainly has been hot lately.
Chinyelu may be the worst layup finisher of 7-footers in the country. It's sometimes very brutal to watch. Kai Houck's confidence could not be higher. He hit 2 huge ones to give Florida a chance. Clayton came out the story of that game, but Houck hit 2 right before to cut that lead down and give Clayton's shots a chance to matter. So I would think that he's got a pretty good chance there. You said 154 to make 1. They've got it 150 at MGM. So poke around at these, always different ones. Curious, real quick on just Janai Broom props, guys. Matt, you were thinking under. I think he's going to have a lot of volume. He had 18, 11, and 6 against Florida in the first meeting, but he took 19 shots to get to the 18. That's my one fear with going unders, that they're probably just going to have to feed him over and over. And I could see Florida being like, we've got 4 bigs to throw at you.
Yep.
We're just going to make you try to beat us with those guys. You're banged up. I just worry about his volume. So I don't really have a strong take either way on Broom. Kai, anything for you there?
No strong take. Yeah, Golden's like 2 different ways. It's like, okay, either they're just going to say, all right, Broom, you try to beat us, or they're going to take him like away completely. It's going to be one of the extremes.
What would you do? I think I'm in the camp of make Broom beat you.
I think you let him beat you.
Yeah, I don't. Yep. You just don't let Baker Mazar get going. Don't let Pettiford get going. Don't give them that like spurt ability with those crazy shots. I think you try and focus on that and make you beat. Play the 2v3 math game.
Yeah, I think I would be all about that as well. If we can get up and down and get transition, and they're trying to beat you with post ups against their interior defenders, I can live with that. Matt, do we bet under Chad Baker Mazara props, hoping that he gets ejected?
It's a T. Yeah,
it's a good idea.
How deep the menu is, but I've not seen technicals over under on any on the list. I think an over would be a good look here. The Final Four officials are obviously going to be discussed at length when they come out. A lot of those veteran guys don't like making the tough tees, but maybe you get like a wild card vet in there that's looking to make a name for himself, and help maybe he singles out CBM in a
Yeah,
bad
he
moment.
just see him getting ejected and then the void Baker Mazara props. It's not fair. Well, this was the risk when you bet on that lunatic. So, all right, fellas, that's it. Let's move to the second game here. Duke versus Houston. A lot to table set here. Houston's won 29 of their last 30. They have not lost in regulation since November, and they're a 5-point underdog. That's what you get for accomplishing all that. They're playing in their home state, playing in San Antonio, not overly close to Houston, but close enough that the crowd should be well populated with Cougars fans. Of course, Duke travels well too, so not exactly a Houston home game. But Kai, this opened Duke -4.5, and it's up to 5. So people are buying that we could get this Duke coronation. They blow everybody out. They just blew out a top 7 team in Alabama, just completely took them to the woodshed basically the entire game. Total 136, one of Duke's lowest totals of the season because of Houston's defense. What are you thinking about with this game's side and total?
Yeah, this is a better matchup for Houston. Alabama's defense is just not that good. Houston's defense is great. Yeah, both teams combined have won 32 straight games. So it's someone's got to lose, and it hasn't been a while from either one of them. Different teams this year from last year, but last year was a slog. These teams met in the Elite Eight, 56 possessions, ugly, 105 points. Duke hung right with the Cougars in the glass. They held up defensively. Of course, Shed got hurt, but Duke was impressive. And this year's Duke team is even better on both ends of the floor. They're the biggest team in the country. That means they can battle Houston on the boards. That's obviously a key. They can throw multiple bigs at Juwan Roberts, and they can extend on the perimeter with their size and sort of take away Houston's three. Houston's the top 3 3-point percentage team in the country. That's actually a big part of their offense, especially on kickouts off offensive boards. But if any team, in my opinion, is built to stop Duke, I think it's Houston. They pressure Duke handlers who have been excellent all year. But remember, there's no real true point guard on this team. Sion James is not really a true point guard. He just runs it, and he does a great job of it, to be fair. They're going to make scoring at the rim a chore, and they're going to force Duke to shoot over the top. The Blue Devils can really shoot, but does it throw them off their game at all if shots aren't falling early and if the Houston physicality kind of wears on them or shocks them right away? This is the most physical team, best coach team on the defensive end of the floor in the country. I think this one's sort of a battle, relatively low scoring. I'm leaning towards the under. I'm also going to take the points with Houston +5.
Yeah, it's tough not to take 5 with Houston. The concerns though to me are you look at what Houston's done so far. They've played some physical teams, but they really haven't played a great defensive rebounding team. Like Tennessee doesn't profile as a great defensive rebounding team, and they dominated on the offensive glass when shots were falling. And you just look at what Houston's done. They've played 10 games at neutral sites. They're 4-6 against the spread. They've been obviously favored in most of those games. That's not a big trend. What I do think though is the way they play and how reliant they are on their shot making does worry me at an this cavernous neutral site venue, whatever. But because they get so many offensive rebounds, it doesn't really matter. But Duke, I think, is the best defensive rebounding team they've gone up against so far in this tournament. So that's where I think maybe we haven't seen Houston. I worry about Houston's offense looking more mortal if shots aren't falling, if they can't get 40% of their misses. And that's where Duke's been terrific. Like I know Flag he struggled last game, but I mean on the glass he was awesome. He cleans everything up, gets them going out in transition. So I don't know. I had some matchup concerns there, Jim. I was certainly leaning toward Houston as well. I ultimately landed, but just as a full reveal, I'm gonna take just both dogs money line. Feel pretty good about one of those winning, and that's sort of my plus EV portfolio. But I have some matchup concerns here with Houston, even though they are in their home state, coming off 3 straight games. They basically played road games, right, at Purdue, Tennessee as well. So this is kind of a nice change of pace for them still. I just don't know about the matchup here for Houston. I don't love it, I guess.
So look us in the eye, Matt, and tell us, is that an emotional hedge for Duke?
Partially.
Is that what's going on there? Okay.
Doesn't make
All
it
right.
wrong, Jim.
No, it doesn't. I just want to make sure the listeners have the peek inside there. Matt, can you name the best defensive rebounding teams by rate that Houston has played this year?
Kansas.
Kansas is up there. Kansas
Okay.
is number 4, basically.
Iowa. No, not Iowa.
Not Iowa State.
State.
I'll just tell you. Number 1's Notre Dame,
Yeah,
which they're not even on the level, so I'm not really worried about that matchup. But number 3 is Gonzaga, who Houston scored very efficiently against. And number 2, the one that's probably the closest comp in terms of like size, is BYU, who Houston blasted by 20 points and 30 points. Again, they're not Duke. It's not the same thing, but I think they can beat teams that can defensive rebound, and their relentlessness and scrappiness and really the shots they take, like they don't get to the rim that much. So it's a lot of long rebounds. It's
Yeah,
a lot of
Sharp
stuff
takes him
that's
from 30.
tippable.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they get to like the mid-range. Cryer and Usain are shooting floaters, stuff that you can tip out. I think sometimes that can be a little immune to great defensive rebounding because even if you're in the right position, it might bounce over your head. We mentioned Auburn barely being a dog this year. Houston's been a dog once. They closed a 1 point underdog at Kansas, which in hindsight now looks kind of silly. Just the fact that how good Houston is, the trajectory Kansas went on. Now, Houston did need a miracle to win that game, but it's just kind of surprising that they were an underdog. That's the only time in the last 2 years that Houston's been a dog. I like Houston just from a spread here. I think five's too many. I think this can be a little bit similar to the Clemson game. Now, this isn't Little John Coliseum, but it's a super physical adult team that has got a lot of physicality to it and just the scrappiness. The way it felt like Clemson got every loose ball in that game. Houston feels like a wonderful loose ball team. You throw a little bit of fifth year senior guys with a ton
Old.
of length at flag.
Yep.
Just see if you can get him out of rhythm like he was for most of that Clemson game. He was great late, but he struggled for the first 35 minutes. I think that sets up well for Houston. There is that little angle of for five of the seven guys in the Houston rotation, they lost to this Duke team last year when they probably shouldn't have because Shed got hurt. Maybe a tiny revenge angle there. I think that at least keeps it close. As great as Duke is, laying five against the second best team in the country, that's kind of crazy to me with how good Houston's been and the matchup that I think works a little bit in their favor.
I was looking at props, Jimbo.
Please do. Tell me what you got.
And to the Houston matchup point, I think the emergence of Maluak for Duke has gotten a lot of love. And Ngamba has been phenomenal too. I think just waves of size up front. All these teams just have just huge, deep front lines. Just like a very clear common thread across all of them. I don't know if I
was
would have
surprised that the Bama game was like all Malawach and very little Gungba.
It tipped one. I think because he's just more mobile, at least on the perimeter. To my, more of a a pro type of big with his ability to kind of step away, but not like he's going to stretch the floor. But he did look more ably to move his feet. I think that's going to matter in this matchup too. But I don't want to like ride the Maluak trend against a vaunted Houston front line. I just don't know if this is the right matchup. But it's pretty crazy to see how important he's been, especially since Malik Brown had his setback high. So to me, Con Knipple is the matchup here. I think Shire just trusts him so much. He drew up so many actions for him against Bama. Now he had a better matchup against Bama than he might have here against Houston. But I think that there's just a lot of trust factor with Shire and how he likes to really dictate the actions that they run, especially in a close game, which I think we probably expect this to be. I think KK gets a lot of usage. I'm not sure it's a point or an assist thing, but I think points for Knipple, maybe threes as well. With Houston's defense, maybe in rotations, but just a quick look there.
Yeah, I don't have much in terms of props. I would lean towards the Duke guards versus the Duke front line. Houston is like the best rim defense and paint defense. I think now the glass should be open for Duke on the offensive end. Houston's a great offensive rebounding team. They are susceptible sometimes to defensive rebounding, so that's where Malawak can really come into play. But I do think they're going to have a tough time scoring in the interior against Houston. So I would look towards guard overs for Duke and more so the unders towards big men. Maybe flag. I mean, 18 and a half's a lot. And he hasn't hit that mark in 3 or 4 games in this tournament. Houston's by far the best defense they've played so far. So, hey, it's scary. He's going to have a lot of volume, like Jim said, with Broom. But that's the way I lean on his point total.
Yeah, I kind of like the flag assists where, especially if they play him in like the mid post, Houston loves to hard double the post. Maybe they won't do it here. And I think they've avoided doing it at times in this tournament. Like a couple times they tried to make Kaufman-Wren beat them one-on-one because they're a little bit scared of the shooting that Purdue had. And boy, Duke's got some absolute gunners around the perimeter. But yeah, flag coming off a really poor scoring effort. I mean, 6 of 16. That's poor for him against Alabama. His quality of games are just so good that the bad ones don't even look that bad. But I think maybe the assists there 4.5. He had 7 against Arizona, 6 against Baylor. Down to only 3 against Bama, but everybody else was cooking so much they didn't need to play through him quite as well. And that's not a guy I expect to have 2 poor games in a row. So lean there. And then the glass, Jalen Roberts over 6.5 rebounds. I know he's a little undersized relative to the Duke front court, but again, the flag matchup, I think Clemson got a little bit on up on him with their physicality. Flag only had 5 rebounds in that game. Lock-in and Shefflin both, I think, had big games on the glass. So I lean towards Jalen Roberts getting a bunch there, and hopefully his ankle is fully healthy after another week off.
Yeah, right.
Matt, any other angles for you? You mentioned the Knippel over three. He's for 3 pointers over 1.5 at MGM is -175. So people are definitely wise to that.
Okay.
Sion James to hit one is -155. I don't even want to tell the people what Malawatch is because I don't think he's going to hit one. How about Proctor, Matthew? He came into this tournament on a tear, started on a tear. Over 2.5 is plus money, +110.
Yeah, I said 2+ is -220 for Proctor and -180 for Knippel at FanDuel. This is where it's tough. It's just who go through. You have to kind of play the matchup game, right? Houston's guards, who guards who, and then who do you value as like, is there a wink link in that?
Who gets to
in
pick
that
on
armor?
Cryer?
Cryer's the wink link, right? Yeah, and I think honestly he probably gets the Proctor matchup. I don't think he's going to guard Knippel. You can't match me against Knippel. I think Knippel can kind of bully him. I mean, Knippel, I think, is very.
Yep, and James cutting against him.
And James cutting and James size. So maybe you're right. Maybe Proctor's actually the more favorable matchup. But we know Proctor's had a tendency to kind of hide in some of these big games. I think that's changed this year. I think he's really like made that narrative into a motivational, like I'm going to take the big ones, and he's been confident for most of this postseason run. So you're right, Jim. As we're workshopping this, you're talking me into some Proctor looks for overs here.
Yeah, I mean, so and really even like the Clemson game, he was the guy that carried them through that. Like it felt like some of their biggest games where other guys struggled, it was actually Proctor that stepped up and rose to the occasion. Last year against NC State in the Elite Eight was maybe the worst he's ever played, but he's gotten a lot of redemption on this junior season for him. Okay, that's it for that game. Let's take a quick glance at the futures here. To win it all, Duke is the favorite, even money right now at BetMGM. You can probably find a +105 at some places out there. There was a +110 at FanDuel on Monday, and it vanished quickly. People ate that up for the Blue Devils. Kai laughs because we were looking at it, weren't we?
Took it. Yeah, I hedged I have 3 futures on the other team, so I took the 110. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got futures stuff here where I want to move around my payouts because I believe, as Duke is indicated by the odds, the most likely to win, and I want to shift my payout to that. But Florida right behind at +275, given that they are the favorite in the other semifinal, that makes sense. Houston +425, Auburn +525. And then real quick, the matchups, guys, from BetMGM, Duke and Florida +150. That's just a matchup. You don't have to get the winner. Duke versus Auburn is +225. Houston versus Florida +350. Houston versus Auburn +475. Any of those jump out at you, Mr. McEwen?
No, I don't see a ton of value out there on the champ. If you really think Duke is that dominant, sure, but that's nothing there for me.
That's I think, whole narrative of this whole thing is like, we were talking about how these are the four elite teams, but Duke is being priced like they're a cut above the rest, and analytically they are. Ken Pom, they're 3 points higher in net rating. That doesn't jive with I think the general perception. Maybe you guys agree with that. I kind of think Duke is a slight cut above the rest of these teams. I'm not sure if it's. I think the odds are maybe overstating that gap, just because of how consistently dominant they've been against, again, ACC, and now they've been great in the tournament. Yes, but I think the Bama matchup was actually one in hindsight that felt more favorable to them than what they'll see in the Final Four.
I'd say I would rather just bet on most outstanding player, because I think there's 4 clear choices on one for each team. I don't see anybody but the Stars winning this. So if you prefer, Houston's actually the one question mark, but
yeah, I would agree there. Yes.
Yeah. But so if you want a futures take on this, if you want to take one of them to win it all, just look at the futures market. Broom's 7-1 to win player of the tournament or the Final Four. Auburn's 525 to win the championship. Broom is not going to lose most outstanding player if they win the title.
Again, this is for whole tournament, right? In theory,
no, it's just Final Four.
The Final Four.
Yeah, just Final Four.
Okay.
This is I think it's a voted on award. It always goes to the star player. If you recall the Kansas year where Agbaji should not have won. McCormick should have won.
Yeah.
And Agbaji won it.
That somebody else has to be so much better than Flagg, Clayton, or Broom for any of those 3 to lose it. Your first team All-Americans, they're going to get the reputation bump from basically every voter. So I would tend to agree with Kai there. Now the flag plus 110, that's what I'm seeing at BetMGM. Shop around, see if you can find something better.
Mhm.
But the difference there between Duke plus or Duke even money
Yeah.
and flag plus 110 isn't a lot, but might be worth looking at. Probably not for us as a hedge, Kai. I don't want to have
No, no.
the open and be open to the Proctor 30-point game and somehow lose it. But yeah, with Clayton and Broome, it would be shocking if someone played well enough to overcome the reputation gap. With Houston, it's a little more questionable. Their
Yeah.
top guys are Cryer 10-1, Uzan 16-1, Sharp 25-1, Roberts 30-1. Really, any of those guys can have a huge game. Uzan has kind of carried them through this tournament. Cryer was really bad against Purdue, and Uzan saved them. So perhaps there is a little bit more balance with them. Kai, who's your favorite of that grouping if somebody was diving into
Yeah.
the Houston most outstanding player market?
I'd go Roberts 30-1, or I'd go Uzan 16-1. Those would be my choices. Now Roberts may not put up the stats, but I don't know. They might just default to he is, I think, their most important player, and he'll have the ball at the end of the games if they're in tight situations.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
love going to him in the ISO post thing.
yep. Get
You
him
know,
going downhill to his left.
right. That left
Mhm.
is crafty. It's funny. I mean, Milo's for all I was skeptical of him, he has been almost bulletproof. Two of his last three have been mortal, and I think maybe he doesn't have that that name pedigree or that momentum coming into this. But then we talk about the Roberts injury could be a concern. Um, yeah, Houston's tough. I mean, I don't. That's one where it's like if you're betting. If you like Houston, I almost feel like you would bet the Houston team because I don't know where the production comes from. I don't know what the voters would think about, if they had to pick a winner from a player from that team. But guys, I think you guys are right about the Roberts is like kind of the heart and soul guy where there, probably be some momentum to give him like an honorary achievement type of nod in a sort of sense. I think it's close. So
Yeah, but
Tough
Samson
though.
loves him. Samson would
Samson
tell you
loves him,
he's like
right?
their leader. He like cried during Sharp or Roberts's senior day thing. Like I think that indicates his value to the team. But I mean, all those guys are good, and
Sharp could hit 100 threes and win it because they love
Right.
guards. Yeah,
Crier could have
exactly.
reason with it
it's
too.
yeah,
Yeah, that's one I wouldn't really mess with just
yeah.
because I think of the variance possibilities within it. So yeah, I'm not betting much in the most outstanding player market just because of what we said with the top players and the other three teams in Houston being such a toss-up. There isn't really like a wild card that really intrigues me unless you love Proctor, but I don't quite love him enough to get there on the Duke one. Flag's just unassailable reputation wise with the number one
Mm.
pick and how well known he is. He's like the most popular player in college basketball in years and years.
You got
So
to
I
remember too
believe
that
that's
the
it. Yo,
week
go ahead,
off,
Matt.
not week off, but 4 days to rest. Right, it's the second time he's had that break since his injury. I got to think that helps a little bit, right? Not that
Yep.
he's looked like injured, but certainly has to help.
Yeah, I mean, how good was he against Arizona? Goodness, just like a virtuoso type of game. I would expect more of that level of performance than the Alabama game where he looked like just a really good all-conference guy instead of the best player in the sport. All right, that wraps it up. So the overall leans definitely a Houston lean from the group at 5, despite how invincible Duke has looked at times. Houston kind of sets up with their physicality, half-court play as being a tough matchup for them, and then leans more to the overs. I think in the Florida Auburn game in terms of props, nobody's betting a side or total quite in that game, as we think the numbers are pretty sharp. But I might add something on Florida if Broome kind of comes out that he's not moving well, or if we see him Kai at open practice on
Yeah.
Friday and he doesn't look great. So we'll try to get boots on the ground. And of course, Mr. McEwen, we'll be scouting the inflation of the balls, the tightness
Yep.
of the rims.
Of
We'll
course.
have that coming to you from at 3man we or at 3MW_CBB,
The
the
Alamo
ball
Dome,
and
not
court
a
report.
cavernous venue, is it, Jim? It's big, but not like
It's not the Superdome in New Orleans
right or
or
the
the
Lucas
Phoenix
Oil
Stadium.
or
Yeah.
yeah.
So we'll see. I'm excited to check that out because, man, the balls and the rims seem to have a huge influence on totals in all of the regions this year. So going to have to take a look at that once we get boots on the ground. That is it. I believe this is our final BBOC episode of the season. So
Wow.
thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you to Matt and Kai for all of their wonderful handicapping work this season. It was a pleasure. Always enjoy being on this feed with Stucky and Mike and Greg and all the boys at Action Network. So thank you to Matt and David behind the scenes, our wonderful producers. And that wraps it up, folks. Enjoy this historic Final Four. Hopefully we get some elite games. Best of luck to you. Cheers.